Hello everyone! This video is part of a series where we are developing a microservices-based social media application. We are using React for the front end and NodeJS for our backend services. In today's video, we are going to finish the implementation of the email verification route. We will start by validating the body of the incoming request. If there are any errors, we will send the appropriate response to the user. If not, we then proceed to marking the user as verified in the database, and then we send a successful response back to the user. We are back at the JIRA board, and I want to make a small adjustment here because from now on I would like to implement a few more subtasks in the same video. I would like to focus more at the user story level and try to implement as much as we can of a single user story in the video. This means that a couple of subtasks are going to be implemented in the same video. So I'll just move all the remaining subtasks related to the sign up information to in progress. And I have also defined another document that we can use, or that at least provides a better outline of the different moments, the different steps in this video. We'll start by parsing and validating the incoming request of the user. This comes to the email verification route. We want to validate the token from the incoming request body, we want to extract the token from the request body, and we want to implement any custom errors for invalid and not found token. As we will see, this is going to be slightly different in this video because we are not going to directly use the custom errors. We are going to simply send a verification status of failed and a status code of 500. So this is going to be the response to the user upon unsuccessful validation. We then move to updating the user document in the database. So we want to fetch the corresponding user based on the verification token and set the user as verified in the system. We then proceed to raising the corresponding user verified event. We will create the necessary class and implement the serialize REST method. And remember, these events, they will all be moved to their specific package at a later point. There will be some refactoring, but I want us to start thinking about or thinking in terms of events. So the structure of the thinking to go more in the direction of what is actually happening in the system. We are then going to send the correct response to the user upon successful email verification. So we will set a status of 200 and we'll send the body with verification status of success. Let's go back to the IDE and let's start the implementation of number 1. I'm back at my IDE, and if you remember, this was the status of our code at the end of the previous video. If you're following all the videos, maybe you are noticing a few changes. I'm trying to make the workspace a little bit cleaner and zoom in a little bit more so that you can better understand what's going on in the code. I'm not running the terminal in the same window anymore. I'm actually running in another window. So here. So let me start by running the test watch command. And let's verify that all our tests are passing. That's great. All our tests are passing. So let's go back to the IDE and let's make a few adjustments. Before we continue with the implementation, I want to change the return to a 500 here. Okay, this 500 and this 500 here. This is because I would prefer to have a more generic error message that we are going to use if either the email verification token is invalid, meaning it doesn't follow the format, or whether or if the verification token is not found in the database. Okay, even though it may follow the format of 64 characters of length, but it's not present in the database, we also want to send a 500 with just a verification status of failed according to our requirements. So I'm going to also update the code so that the tests continue to pass. And if I check in my terminal, everything is still working fine. Let's go back to our code and let's continue implementing the functionality of validating the incoming request. Just to make things cleaner, or just to make things clearer, remember that the email verification token is the key that we are looking for. And let me open the signup route. Here in the signup route, we have an example of how we validate the email and the password fields in the body of our request. I'll simply copy this from here and I'm gonna paste here in my handlers array. Remember that we already provisioned for that. And I'll just make a few adjustments here to make sure that everything is conforming. Okay, we can now change this to, instead of password, simply say email verification token. And here, what I want to have is a minimum length of 64 and a maximum length of 64. Okay, and I don't need a message in this case because I will send a simple verification status failed to the user upon failure of validation. So let's do let's go a bit more here, and let's say, let me come here to the signup route and I'll simply copy the same logic if the errors.length is greater than 0, right? So if errors.length is greater than 0, and the errors, of course, I need to get from my validation result. So I'll also copy this one. I don't need the invalid input here, neither here. Now, remember that the custom errors in our application, they are expecting an array or an object which contains an errors key, and this errors key is actually an array of errors. Let me open the custom error from our errors directory, and here you can see that we have a serialized error output. Remember that this has to be the output of the serialized error output method. If I click here, this has a single key errors and a serialized error array. Now, this is great if we want to provide a detailed information to the user of what went wrong in the back end. For example, some invalid form or some action that is not allowed. We can simply put everything here under this errors object or under this errors key. The difference in the verify router is that we don't really want to expose any information about the errors. We only want to send a status of 500 and a body that has a verification status of failed. So instead of proceeding here, let's go back to our test. I'll close a couple of tabs here that are not necessary. And we will check that the response of this request actually contains a single attribute or contains an object with a single key that is the verification status key, right? This key here. So I will copy this. This is going to be my response. And I will expect the response dot body dot verification status dot to equal failed, like so. Of course, if I save this and I go back to my terminal, then we will see that the tests are going to fail because I'm not sending any body to my response or with my response. We will go back to the code and we will implement this. As you can see here, the expected status was failed, but we received an undefined. So let's go back to the code and let's fix that. What we want to do here is we want to cut this line with the res.send status and we want to paste this inside of the if block. So here I will say send, or sorry, a status here. And then I will send an object which is going to have the verification status of failed. Okay, let's see if the tests start to pass now. Exactly, now everything is passing. For now, let's continue with the functionality of updating the user in the database. So I will go back to my test file. Let's then create a new test, which is going to have a valid user signing up. And we will need to do a bit of a hacking here because remember, in our original or in our actual flow, this verification token would be sent to an email or via an email to the user. The user would click on this. This link is going to open then a tab or a route in our web application, and this route is going to send a post request to our server. Now the problem here is that we don't really have the email server running in the test environment, and this is not a trivial matter to solve. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a little bit of a workaround. We are going to save the user. Then based on the user, we are going to retrieve the created verification token And then we will create a request with that verification token to our route. Now, of course, this is something that wouldn't happen in reality, but this is simply cutting the email step from the process. Okay, let's do that. I'll start by naming the test. So it should mark the user as verified upon successful verification, or upon valid. Let's even do better, upon matching verification token. This has to be an async function. And let's create our user. I'm in the signup.test.ts file, and I will just copy this valid user info so that we can use this at any point within our verify.test.ts file. Now I will also copy this request because I want to create a valid user, and I will paste this here. I don't need to worry about the expect. And my response is going to contain the email of the user. So let me simply console.log the response.body.email. We'll go back to the terminal and we will see whether the email is correctly populated. Exactly, console.log test@test.com. Just a remark, remember that we haven't activated our email sender before our tests, right? So here I have no instructions whatsoever that are activating my email sender. I can again come to the signup.test.ts file and copy this before each block here, where I'm going to activate the email sender before each test. This is going to import a few dependencies. So let me just fix these imports. And now the test should pass. Let's go back to the terminal and check that out. Exactly. Everything is passing and we have the test@test.com email. So we can use this email to fetch the user from the database, get its ID, and then fetch the verification token from the account verification collection. Back in my IDE, I'll simply say const user, could even be created user, is going to be await user.find1. And here I will need to import the user class or the user model. And the user.find1 is going to receive an email, and this is going to be response.body.email. Here I will have my created user, and this can be null, so I need to simply check if created user, like so. And then I can say const verification token is going to be await account verification dot find one. And here I'm going to find by user ID. So if I come to the account verification model and the account verification document, as you can see, we have a user ID attribute. I'll simply copy this and paste this here. This is going to be the created user dot underscore ID. And here I would expect, first things first, expect the verification token dot not to be null, like so. I don't need the console.log statement anymore. Let's see if our tests are passing. Exactly, everything is still passing in our terminal. We have our verification token, so we can remove, actually we can leave this test here. And now what we want to do is we want to send a request not to the sign-up route, but to the verify route. So I will copy this little code here, or even I could copy the one from above here, because this one is more similar to what we want to do. And here I cannot use response anymore. So here I will say user response, like so, or sign up response, right? Makes more sense. Sign up response.body, and then verification response. And here in the email verification token, I will simply say verification token dot, I think that should be email verification token, like so. Of course, it's telling me that the object is possibly null because it may be the case that it's not going to find a account verification document within the account verification collection. Actually, I think that we can skip this whole if, because we know that we're going to find these things, right? We are in a test environment and we are really ensuring that we are creating everything beforehand. So I'll simply go and tell TypeScript with this exclamation dot that yes, there will be a user in the database, and yes, there will be a verification token in the database. So now that we are sending the email verification token with the correct email verification token, all we have to do is to expect that, well, first things first, we would expect that the user here, that the created user is going to be marked as verified in the system, right? So I will have to go again and look for this user in the database because the created user is not valid anymore. Now this created user is the previous user, right? And this has the isVerified flag marked to false. So what we need to add at the bottom is we want to retrieve this user again. Let me actually do a bit of change here. I'll simply say the let created user to be the await, or we could even use just user here because we are going to refetch this user. So I'll say, okay, user.id, and then at the bottom here, I'll say user is equal to await, again, user.findOne. And now I would expect my user.isVerified dot to equal true, like so. Okay, now the verification response is not really necessary at this stage, so I'll simply delete this. And now my user, I need to mark this that yes, it is going to exist in my database. So I'll simply save this and our test should fail. Why should they fail? Well, if I come back to the verify route, we actually have no code whatsoever to mark the user as verified. Let's go back to the terminal and let's confirm this. Exactly. So our test is failing. And if we go up here, we'll see that, oops, it doesn't really tell us anything about the flag. It's simply saying timeout, async callback was not invoked within 5,000 millisecond timeout. Now, what is actually happening here? If I come back to the code and I look briefly over this implementation here, well, the errors.length is actually 0. There is no error here because we are sending a valid verification token. So the request really just hangs. I'm not sending any response here in my status. After the if statement, there is no return res.send, or there is no res.send or res.send status or res.status.send. There is nothing. It just returns basically undefined, right? Or void in this case. So we first need to add could be return res.send status, let's say 200 for the moment, or anything. It could be also send just an empty body here. We will take care of this implementation later on. And this is going to make our tests fail for the right reason. I'll save this and I'll go back to the terminal to confirm that. The tests are still failing, and now the reason is the correct one, right? So there is no timeout message here. There is simply an expected of true, but a received of false. So let's go back to our file and let's implement the logic to mark the user as verified in the system. That's the fun part. So if there is no errors, then we can simply proceed with extracting the email verification token from the request body. So const, let's do it like this, email verification token is equal to request.body. Sorry, that should be not request, but rec.body, like so. And then I have a small warning that says that it's not using the value. So let's go ahead and let's use it. What we want to do is we want to find the corresponding account verification document within the account verification collection, then fetch the user ID from that document, find this user in our database and mark it as verified in the system. So the verification, or let's say the account verification, actually maybe we could even do this with the structuring like so. That's going to be an await, and I need to update my route here to be async. Await account verification, account verification dot find one, and it's going to be the email verification token like so. And then here I can destructure the user ID. And if I try to do so, as you can see, we will have an error. We'll see property user ID does not exist on type account verification document or null. This is something that we could actually already plan for a little bit in the future. Let's, instead of using directly destructuring here, let's say the verification doc like so, right? And then we will say, okay, if there is no verification doc, and I'm going a little bit ahead of time here, I want to send the same status as before. Additionally, I also want to return here because I don't want to really continue the execution of the code if there is no verification document. I also want to return from here, right? So if there is a verification document, I want to continue and I want to find a user, or I want to find one user, and I want to update a certain property of that user. This is done by using the find one and update method from Mongoose. So let's define our new variable here. The user is going to receive, or this variable here is going to receive the new value of the user. And I'll simply say await user.find1 and update, like so. And here I need to pass the ID of the user. The ID of the user is going to be the verification doc.user ID, like so. And I'm still missing a couple of options here. So I need to pass an object with the updates that I want to perform. And here I want to simply say set, or actually I can directly pass the value that I want to update. So the isVerified I want to mark as true. And here I want to say new true, like so. Because then I will receive the new user that comes as a result of this operation, right? So if I don't pass the new flag here, remember, I will still receive the old user in our response, or as the return value of this whole user.find1 and update. So here I want to receive the new user, so I need to pass this new true as an option to the find1 and update method. Now, if there is no user, right? So if the user was not found, I simply want to return a code of 500 again and a verification status of failed. Now, this is really getting repetitive. We have 1, 2, 3 times the same code. So we will extract this to a new or to a helper function, but a little bit later in this video. For now, let's continue with the task at hand. So this should be everything we need to implement in order to have our tests passing. Let's save this file and let's check the tests. Everything is passing. So now we know that we are marking the user as isVerified in the database. An additional test that I want to implement before we move to the next part of this video is related to ensuring that we respond with a 500 and a verification status of failed in case the email verification token is valid but cannot be found in the database. So let's implement this. It should return a 500 if the provided email verification token is not found. This is going to be an async function. So here is just really definition. I'm sorry that it's a little bit cut here in the end, but it's nothing important. So I'm trying to keep all the important information within this screen. So here I can simply copy this whole thing and I can paste it here, but instead of passing something here, I actually want to pass a new verification email token. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is under the utils here. Let me try to find exactly the generate email verification token method. So I'll simply copy and paste this here, and I will import this. And here I will call it like so. So this is a valid email verification token, okay? But because we didn't perform any action here, we didn't sign up any user to the database, this email verification token is not going to be found. So this test should still pass. Let me save and let's give it let's check the terminal. Yep, everything is passing just fine. Great. The next step is to simply ensure that we raise the correct event and that we send a response with a status of 200 and the body of verification status of success. Let's come back to our events folder, and within the tests directory, I will create a new file, which is going to say userverified.test.ts, and I will probably copy some of the structure from the user signed up test. Okay, so maybe, well, let's say I'll copy everything. Of course, there is a little bit of code that we don't need, so update this to what we actually want to test for this event. So the only thing we want to test for this event is that it really exposes the ID of the user. We don't really need the email, so let's just write it should expose only the ID when serializing to REST. Now here, what we want to have is a user verified event, and the user verified event is going to be pretty much the same as the user signed up event when it comes to the constructor arguments. It is going to be user verified, and here we simply want to receive a user, right? So of course, here our user is going to have a isVerified flag of false, but for these purposes here, we really just want to make sure that the userVerified.serialize to REST or serialize REST is going to contain, so object.keys is going to equal just ID, right? Like so, and here I can remove this, and I can also remove this because I want just one key in my response. This test is going to fail, of course, because we have no user verified event. So let's create a new event here that is going to be called user verified. I'll come to the user signed up file and let's see what we can reuse from here. We can basically copy everything and we will change the details of the implementation within the user verified class. So this, the name here, first things first, this is going to be the user verified event. This is going to be the user verified REST payload. I'm not going to have the email, and the user verified REST payload. I need the base of event and I need the user document. So I'll just adjust this imports. I will set my status code to 200 because that's the code that we want to have. The constructor stays the same. Here I want to have to receive a user document within my constructor. And here we are not checking anything specifically to test that the user is verified. And this perhaps is something that's going to change in the future. I'm not sure about it yet, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Remember, now our focus is just to think in terms of what is happening in the system. So we will only raise the user verified event if the verification process is successful. If I come back to the verify tab, we will raise this event somewhere here, right? New user verified with user, like so. And this is because we want to make sure that we only emit the event if the verification process is successful. So by creating this event after everything happens, then I can ensure that yes, my user is going to be verified. If there are any problems in between, I will never reach this line here. So let's go back to our userVerified.ts file and I'll change the user signed up REST payload to the verified REST payload. And I just need to remove that email line there. Now I come back to the tests and here I will simply import the user verified from user verified. I could also import it, I think, from the previous file, but well, let's leave it like so. And here I don't have an email. So I just want the object.keys to equal ID and the user verified event get status code to equal 200. Okay, now because we already changed this file, then it's going to be true. So if I save this, I should have all my tests passing. No major surprises here. All the tests are passing. So let's go back to the implementation. One thing that we can do here in this user verified event is that we can actually include the information that the verification status is successful, right? So here let's start with a string and we will simply say verification status is success, like so. A benefit of using this approach is that now I can use my serialize to rest or serialize rest method from the user verified event. So let's simply destructure this from userVerified.serialize rest. And we'll say that this is going to have the verification status, like so. So now here in my response body, I can set a status of 200, or even better, I can set a status of userVerified.getStatusCode, like so. And then I will send a body with the verification status. This should be everything that we need to implement in order to cover all the topics here. So now we are sending a status of 200. We are implementing the serialize rest method. We are creating the necessary user verified event, but we forgot to implement the tests for a successful verification. So let's come back to the tests before we save the files here, and let's implement a new test here. It should, oops, let me just erase this. Not this one, this one. It should send a 200 and successful verification status upon successful verification. Okay, so this is going to be again an async function, like so. And here I will copy most of the things from this test, except for the expect statements. All we want to do is instead of we don't need to test, or actually we need to have the verification token, but here we want to have a response from this. Verification response is going to be await request app.post, blah, blah, blah. And then here I don't need to worry about the user anymore because I'm testing the user in the previous test. And here I will expect a 200, and I will also expect the verification response dot verification status, like so, dot to equal success. Now here I can use const again because the user is not being reassigned. One remark is that, of course, the verification status is part of the body, not part of the verification response. But as soon as I implement it like so, and I save the files, everything should be passing in my tests. Oops, I think we forgot to include this verification status in the keys of the serialized response. Remember that we did this change a little bit ad hoc in the code here. So let's go back to the user verified test. I will open the user signed up test because I want to copy this block of code here. Let's update this test. So it is here. I'll paste it. Instead of the email, we will have a verification status like so. And now everything should be passing. Perfect. So all the tests are passing. But before we finish this video, I would like to do a bit of cleanup. Remember that I have mentioned we have quite a bit of duplicated code. And I would like to fix that before finishing the video. So I gave some thought to the issue and I realized that we are doing a little bit more than what we have to. We are using both the response code of 500 and the verification status of failed to indicate that the verification process failed. And here down, we are using the status code of 200 and the verification status of true or of success to say the same thing, that the verification process was successful. Now, we don't really need all of that. We can really work with the status code. If we have a 200, we know that the process was successful. If we have a 500, we know that the process was, or that the process failed. So let's remove the code that we don't need here. We don't need the verification status anymore. We can remove this line as well. We also don't need this verification status anymore. We can simply say send status like so. Then we can also say send status like so. We don't need the send method here. We also can say send status here. We don't need the send method. We can say also here send status 500, and then our code is getting a little bit cleaner. Now, of course, our tests will start to fail because we are testing a few properties of our response, right? So here I can get rid of this expect, and I can get rid of this expect as well. Here I can remove this, and I can also remove this response. I don't think that there is anything here at this level. Everything is fine. And then here I also have this that I can simply remove. Now I'll save this and let's see if our tests are going to continue passing. Everything is still passing. And there is one other small thing that we can do to improve the readability a little bit. So now you see that we are sending a status code of 500. Now remember that our error handler, if we don't throw a custom error, if we throw a general error, it's going to return this res.sendStatus of 500. So let's change this implementation a little bit just to throw a couple of errors instead of directly sending the status. So throw new error, and I'll simply say here, because this message will never reach the user, I can be specific about what went wrong. So the email verification token is invalid. Is invalid, like so. This message will probably or will most likely be used for logging purposes if anything goes wrong in the application, or if we want to access the logs, we could benefit from having these messages here, but this will not be exposed to the final user. Now, if there is no verification doc, the email verification token was not found. And if there is no user, I'll simply say that the user with the corresponding verification token was not found, like so. Now I think that our code is a little bit cleaner and easier to read. Let me just fix this. I think that we can actually import the user verified from the events if we export this from the file. Let's come back here to index.ts, and I'll say export default as user verified from /user verified. So now I can actually import this from /events, like so. And everything should be working just fine. So let's check our tests once more for the last time, and let's make sure that everything is passing. Perfect. So I think we did a lot of progress in this video. We have finished implementing the email verification route, and we have implemented all the necessary tests to make sure that this is working correctly. Maybe the case that in the future we come back and we do a little bit of refactoring if we see that this structure is not the best one, or if we want to send another error that is not the generic 500 error, then we could actually come back to this implementation and do a few changes. Actually, before we go, I just want to make sure that our response body is empty. So remember, we don't want to expose these messages to the user. So let's make sure that every time we throw an error here, we are simply sending just a 500. We are not sending any response.body. Now, how do we test that the response body is empty or is an empty object? Well, in Jest, we now just need to get again the response object. So the one that I deleted a little bit some time ago, we have to actually introduce it back. And now we will expect this response.body and not really here. Let's do one thing here. Let's say to be and something like so, and we'll see that this is going to fail. Okay, so I just want to show you some messages that Jest is going to present to us. I'll save this and I'll go back to the tests for us to inspect the errors. Exactly. So we can already see them. I don't need to wait for the test suite to finish. And as you can see here, well, it expected an empty object and it receives serializes to the same string. So it's a little bit cryptic message, but if we read one line above, we see that it says if it should pass with deep equality, replace to be with to strict equal. So let's do so in our tests and we will see that they will start passing. Okay, so to strict equal an empty body, to strict equal also an empty body. I don't think that there is anything else that we need to test here. No, and now here at the bottom, we want to make sure that the response is also going to strict equal an empty response or an empty object. I'll save this and let's see if the tests are still passing. Yes, now everything is passing and we can rest assured that our response has no body. So we will, in the application in the front end, we will judge the result of the verification process based on the response status. If it is a 500, it failed the verification. If it is a 200, the verification was successful. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to implement for this video. And before we go, let's go back to the terminal and let's fix the prettier and eslint errors that we will probably have because we did quite a bit of progress here. So I'll stop the tests, I'll clear the console, and let's run prettier fix so that we can first fix the files. And now let's see what linting is going to present to us. Oh, great. We have no errors whatsoever. Well, that's unexpected. Normally I run into some problems with linting, but now that we have everything clean and everything formatted, I'll commit this and I will add the link to the description of this video so that so that you can also check the code in case you have any problems during implementation. After committing and pushing the changes, we can actually go back to GitHub and create a PR in order to merge this branch. Let's go back to JIRA and let's see whether there is anything pending. So as a user, I want to verify my signup information so that I can confirm I am a real user. Now, do we decode the verification token? Yes. So this we can move to in review and we can move to done. Do we look for the user with the corresponding key? Yes. So we can move in review and then done. Mark the user as verified, check, in review, done, and send the appropriate response to the user, check, and in review, and then done. I also want to update the parent issue. So now let's go back to GitHub and let's create the pull request. Great. I'm here in the unsocial app page. It's already indicating that my branch has recent pushes. So I'll compare and pull request. Let's create a nice name here. That's going to be feature authentication implement email verification. Like so, and I'll create a pull request. Here I could add some description, but because it's only me, then I think that we can I can skip that. Right, so remember we have added the continuous integration test some time ago, and if you are curious about it, so let me show you the details here of the tests that we run once we are in the cloud. So just give it a couple of seconds while it starts the workflow, and then it's going to run a couple of tests. Here we can already see that it's going to run 4 different tests for us. It's going to check the formatting, it's going to check the linting, it's going to check TypeScript errors, and then it's going to run all the tests. And only if all these 4 tests pass, I will be able to merge my pull request. Now it takes a couple of seconds always, so we just have to be a little bit patient. Of course, in a real world, we wouldn't be always checking our tests, but in case this is your first video, I think it's nice to show you what's going on behind the scenes. Yep, with all the tests passing and with our checks green, we can then come back to the conversation and squash and merge this branch. Perfect. I will delete the branch. In JIRA, the task is already done. So in the next video, we will come back and we'll start with the implementation of the next feature. That's it for this video, and we have now successfully implemented the email verification route. If you want to get notified every time new videos are uploaded to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I try to upload multiple videos every week on different topics, so I'm pretty sure there will be something that interests you. And also, if there is any topic that you're interested in and that you would like me to cover in a future series, make sure to write it down in the comments or upvote the topics that you like, because I take these things into consideration when planning future series in the channel. That's it for today. Thank you for your time and see you in the next video. Bye bye.